Wat higher?
No, they're going to sit in Kol Shoni V'Lav.
Okay. Praised are you, Adonai our God, King of the universe, who gives the Torah of truth and the good news of salvation to your people Israel and to all the people through your Son Yeshua the Messiah, Lord. Amen.
Hi everyone. Hello. How are you guys doing?
Bruce, is it somebody leading? Is it somebody teaching tomorrow?
Alright, let's turn to 1 Samuel chapter 20. First Samuel 20. Okay, are we there? Okay. So I just want to start with like a recap from last week so that we're all on the same page. Right, so let's recap from David and Goliath. So David fought Goliath, killed him, and then he came to meet with Saul, King Saul, and at that meeting, Jonathan was there. Jonathan instantly liked him, was drawn to him, and made a covenant with him. We're going to see a little bit about that covenant play out today. Did anybody pre-read to today's chapter?
Yes.
Okay, 2 people pre-read. Is it just 2 people that pre-read? Okay, that's fine. We'll do some live study then. Okay, so taking it from where I was, Jonathan makes a covenant with him. After that, David goes out to war again. He's very successful. And when they come back from the slaughter of the giants, the women come out dancing and singing. Saul has killed his, how many?
1,000.
And David his? Which made Saul angry and jealous. And then what happened to Saul from that point?
He had a distressing spirit from the Lord.
Excuse me?
He had a distressing spirit.
Distressing, yeah, very distressing. And what did that cause him to do? Ultimately, so it was distressing. I mean, he had a distressing spirit even before that, which was the reason why David first came up to the temple to play the lyre, and which kind of gave Saul relief. But then now that the distressing spirit came upon Saul, when he got angry and jealous, what happened to Saul? What did that make him want to do? To kill David. All right. And how did he try to kill David? How many times did he throw his spear? Twice. Okay. All right. So that happens, and then Saul basically figures out, you know what, God is with him. I can't kill him this way. Rather let not my hand kill him. So what does he do? What's his next plan? I can't read lips, Matthew. What's that?
Sends his messengers.
Before the messengers.
Tries to get his son to think that he'll take his position as king.
Okay, that did happen, but just before that part.
Sends him out to battle.
He sends him out to battle, and he's saying that the Philistines will kill him. Nah? And during that time, he says he's got this older daughter, Merav, and he's like, basically, I'll give you my daughter Merav, just continue fighting valiantly for me. But in the back of his mind, he's thinking the Philistines are the ones who are going to kill him, right? Okay, so it was first the spear, and then we've got the Philistines trying to kill him. Well, him trying to use the Philistines to kill him. But then David doesn't die, right? He wins battle after battle, and then what happens next? Okay, so that's where eventually he speaks to his son and his servants, and he's like, guys, we need to You need to do something about this guy. But then Jonathan speaks up for David. Before he speaks up with his father, he tells David himself, he's like, listen, my father wants to kill you. So hide in this field behind that stone. I'll speak with my father in this place and I'll just find out what's going on. And then so Jonathan does that. While he's doing that, he intercedes on behalf of David. And Saul makes an oath. He says, I swear as Adonai lives, David will not die. Okay, so Jonathan is at ease because he's trusting in his father's word. And then what happens? Matthew mentioned it earlier. He sends messengers. So describe what happens with his messengers. They were sent. Okay. Yes.
He sent a few messengers out and then they started prophesying.
Okay, so excuse me?
And you can carry on.
I didn't hear what you said.
He sent messages,
Yeah.
and then they started prophesying before so they stopped trying to kill David.
Okay, so building up to the time when they start prophesying, when did he first send a group of messengers to David? To his house. After he had fled from the king, when he tried to use a spear again. Okay, so it was 3 times with the spear, and then once with the Philistines, and then now he's going to use messengers. It's kind of like 3 general methods of trying to kill David, if you could put it that way. So then his wife Michal, the one that he ended up marrying for the weird bride price. Do you guys remember the bride price? Don't have to. Okay. All right. So then, as Matthew said, after that he basically flees for his life. He goes to Samuel in a place called the Prophet's Dormitory, or called Nayot, depending on what version you're reading. And at that place, basically the messengers arrive there, 3 groups of them, and as they see the prophets and as they see Samuel prophesying, they also start prophesying. Well, as they see Samuel leading the prophets, they start prophesying. And this happens 3 times up until eventually, actually let's jump into the verse right there. So chapter 19, just before we go into 20. So let's go to verse 20. 20 verse 20. No, 19 verse 20, sorry. You guys there? Shaul sent messengers to capture David. But when they saw the group of prophets prophesying with Shemuel standing and leading them, the Spirit of God fell on Shaul's messengers, and they too began prophesying. When Shaul was told, he sent other messengers, but they too began prophesying. Shaul sent messengers a 3rd time, and they also prophesied. Then he himself went to Ramah. When he arrived at the big cistern in Sechu, he asked, where are Shmuel and David? So now, I find it interesting that he knows David is with Shmuel. Who anointed Saul? You know, so the person who anointed him is with David, and that authority to say that you're a king because God called this prophet, and this prophet follows God, and he was told to anoint you. He's not considering that. You know, it's like, imagine you go to church, to the place where you know that's where people are doing the right things, and then you intentionally go there to still do whatever you want to go do, which is not a good thing to do. Like, it just doesn't, I don't understand how knowing where David is, that he's with Shemuel, he's still going boldly to do what he shouldn't be doing. So it just shows me that there's a point in life where you can be so bent on doing things your own way that even if it's staring you in the face that what you're doing is not good, if your heart is in the wrong place, it's like there's no saving you. It's like, anyways, we'll come back to that. So this verse 21. Sorry, wait, 22. When he arrived at the big cistern in Sechu, So I did a bit of study with this word big cistern. Found out that it's like a pit. Well, it can be a cistern, it can be a well. So it can be full of water, it can be empty of water, and it could also be something like what Joseph was thrown into. It could be like just a big, huge pit. And Sehu is kind of like a lifted up, if you do some study there. So I was seeing that he's coming here in jealousy and pride. And what comes before a fall? Has anyone heard that verse before? Pride comes before a fall. So, I mean, it is a cistern and there was probably water in it. But that reminds me of another verse where God says that you've exchanged me for broken cisterns. I think it might be in Jeremiah. Thank you very much. Bless you. So anyways, just dig into that if you're into studying the Bible, and let me know what you find. As always, you need to test everything. Don't take for granted that I'm sitting in front here with a Bible. You need to test everything, because sometimes we get tongue-tied. Sometimes we just don't see things clearly. Whether it's me or a person on YouTube or anyone, always test what you hear with Scripture. Okay. So anyways, this big cistern in Sehu. So I was just saying this high and low in terms of the pit, and Sehu meaning like lifted up. And it if you check where it is, it's apparently on like a hill that you could see Nayot up as you approached on Sehu type of a thing. It's like lifted up. So I just saw that little play there. Okay, anyways, he asked, where are Shmuel and David? Someone answered, they're at the prophet's dormitory in Ramah. While on his way to the prophet's dormitory in Ramah, the Spirit of God fell on him too, and he went on prophesying until he arrived at the prophet's dormitory in Ramah. So what should have happened in Saul when that happened? What should have happened? He's going there to kill David. Nah? After 3 attempts have failed, and this is not the only 3 attempts, there have been other attempts before this, and everybody's been prophesying. What should be going through his mind?
Basically, that he should have stopped and thought, wait, because if he's getting the gift of prophecy, then he should have realized that what I'm about to do is not right. I'm coming up against God, because God is still in control and he's still in power.
And also, what happened when Saul was anointed?
But he also prophesied.
Yeah, so it should remind him of the time when he was chosen by God, when he was in line with God's will, at the right place at the right time. Because when he met Samuel the first time, it wasn't his own plan to get there. He was chasing donkeys. Chasing donkeys, not finding any, and then through divine hand and appointment, he gets to see Samuel. But now, through his wicked plans, he's going to see Samuel. But he still ends up prophesying. And it should have reminded him of that moment that, okay, God is involved here, what am I doing? Sometimes we just have to take a step back and realign our choices when we started our walk and where we are right now. Are we still in the right direction compared to that day when we gave our lives to God? Does anyone have any questions or comments or anything so far? Everyone good? Okay. 24. He also stripped off his clothes, prophesied in Samuel's presence, and lay there naked all that day and all that night. Hence it continues to be an expression, is Shaul the prophet too. Excuse me. I heard an interesting commentary about this. So here we see Samuel. And he takes off his royal clothes, right? That would have been, he wasn't like stark naked, but he took off like his outer garments, his royalty, and he started prophesying before God. Later on, we see David doing the same thing when he dances before the Ark of the Ark of the Covenant. And we're seeing two kings, one being brought into submission and one through the Spirit of God, dancing and with all his might. Both of them, the Spirit of God is involved, but ultimately what this commentary was saying was that every knee is going to bow one day before God. It doesn't matter whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're a king, whether you're wicked or not. Everybody's going to lay off their outer robely garments and submit and bow to God. That's something, if you'd like to chase, you can go ahead, since we're going to continue with the Samuel study, God willing, and when I get to that place with David in 2 Samuel. Okay, so chapter 20. David fled from the prophet's dormitory in Ramah, returned to Jonathan and said, "What have I done? Where have I gone wrong? What sin have I committed that makes your father want to take my life?" Before we continue, this reminds me of a psalm. Forgot the psalm number. But then David is saying, Lord, if there is any, he's like, if I have done this, if I haven't had integrity, basically, if there's any crookedness in my heart, then let my enemies maul me like a lion and just, let them win. And to be able to pray that prayer is quite something. I actually heard a rabbi saying this, that David was such a sincere guy. How many of us can pray to God, God, if there's any wrong in me, then let this bad thing happen? Like, are you that brave? Sure, like that's quite a prayer. So I'm just reminded of that here, where David comes to Jonathan. It's like, where have I gone wrong? What sin have I committed that makes your father want to take my life? Also remember Leviticus. What does Leviticus 19? Okay, sorry. What's the greatest commandment?
Love the Lord God.
With all.
Your heart.
Yeah, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And the second is like it, or like unto it.
Love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So David is saying, basically, in God's perfect kingdom, what have I done wrong? Why does my enemy bear a grudge against me? In the beginning of that verse, it says, you shall not bear a grudge against your brother, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So even if you had done something wrong, you correct your brother lovingly. You don't hold a grudge and throw spears, send him off into dangerous neighborhoods, or send messengers to go and kill him. So I think this goes very well with like the current study we're doing with the Kingdom of Heaven. I think we're going to see a lot of those things pop up. Stuff like just basically, sorry about that, just stuff like the fullness of the law. We've got the letter of the law, and Christ came to give us the fullness of the law. And if you guys see any of those topics pop up, just let me know. For instance, he says, you've heard it said, do not murder. But if you call your brother a fool, or say to him good for nothing, you're liable to be judged by the Sanhedrin, by the council, or to go into the fire of Gehenna. So, are you guys catching the links that I'm making here? No? Yes? Are we good? Okay. Let's go to verse 2. Jonathan replied, "Heaven forbid. You're not going to die? Look, my father does nothing important or unimportant without telling me first. So why should my father hide this from me? It just won't happen." In response, David swore, "Your father knows very well that you have made me your friend. This is why he will say, 'Jonathan must not know this,' or he will be unhappy. As truly as Adonai lives, and as truly as you are alive, there is only a step between me and death." Jonathan said to David, Anything you want me to do for you, I'll do. David answered Jonathan, look, tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. Tomorrow, what does your guys' version say there?
New moon.
New moon? Anything else? Everybody got new moon or Rosh Chodesh? And I ought to... Okay, you guys know what Rosh Chodesh is? Should we go into this history? No, let's continue reading. And I ought to be dining with the king. Instead, let me go and hide myself in the countryside until evening of the third day. What does that remind you of? Let me go and hide until the evening of the third day. Okay, 3 days and hiding. New Testament. There we go. Yeshua. And I was just seeing this because, David is the king of Judah. Well, he's going to be king of Judah. And Jesus is the king of Judah, or Yeshua is the king of Judah. And he was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. So, okay, let's keep reading. Verse 6. If your father misses me at all, say, David begged me to let him hurry to Bethlehem, his city. What does Bethlehem mean?
House of bread.
House of bread. Okay. So we've got house of bread. Earlier on, when Saul, this is a big stretch. Okay, just remember house of bread. We might come back to the theme of bread. Because it's the sacrifice for the whole family. Okay, I'm just going to mention it now because I might not remember. When we get into chapter 21, David is going to be asking for bread. Okay, and basically there's this word that's used there where when the priest is asking, David asks for the bread and the priest is like, okay, but only if the women have been kept, if the men have been kept from women. That word kept, is what I want you guys to focus on. So now when you go back to when Samuel was called, there was a time when he was going with his servants and they had no more bread in their sacks. And that word there is the same word that they had no more. It was like it had been kept from him. But there's just this link between now bread that was gone, he's from the house of bread, and then David is going to be asking for bread just now. Just keep that in the back of your mind, especially if you'd like to study this further. Okay. Because it's the sacrifice, the annual sacrifice for his whole family. If he says very good, then your servant will be all right. But if he gets angry, then you will know that he has planned something bad. Therefore show kindness to your servant, for you bound your servant to yourself by a covenant before Adonai. But I have done something wrong. But if I have done something wrong, kill me yourself. Why turn me over to your father? Okay, so this is the first time the word covenant gets mentioned in this chapter. And I want you guys to keep count of how many times everything is happening. So in the previous chapter, we had attempts to kill David. We had 3 with a spear. But then generally there was the spears, there was the Philistines, there was the messengers. So it was like 3 attempts to kill him. Then there was 3 groups of messengers. The word covenant, how many times is it going to come up? And let's just keep making those kind of links. So Jonathan said, heaven forbid, if I were ever to learn that my father definitely decided to do you harm, wouldn't I tell you? So, what's wrong with Jonathan at this point? Do you guys think? Yeah?
I think maybe he doesn't want to believe that his father would do something without him acknowledging it.
And he might be, maybe, I don't know what the right word would be, but it's like he wants to believe the best of his dad. Also, there was an episode where his father went to go kill David in Ramah at the prophet's dormitory, and he ended up prophesying. So maybe he's thinking, you know what, God is working through him now. He used to go crazy, but now he's prophesying, or now he has kind of experienced God a bit. Maybe he's changed. I don't know. But definitely we know that Samuel is not telling him his plans anymore, because he's tried countless times since. Okay, well. Thank you. Yes, Saul. But then, yeah, let's just continue. So Jonathan is basically not seeing his father's true motives, or his father's true heart. Have you ever found yourself in this kind of situation? Where you think you know what's best for you, you think you know what's going on, but you're actually not seeing everything, and it's a bit hidden from you, maybe because you're a bit too close. It could be many things, but it's very important to always find out what's God's viewpoint, what's actually happening, and let it not just be the way I see things, but let it be the way God sees things. Another thing is, there were 12 disciples, and Yeshua's like, and one of you is a snake. Like, they lived together, they went everywhere together, they trusted him a lot because he kept their money, and yet they didn't know him. They didn't know what was in his heart. Yeshua says, no tree that is good produces bad fruit. I'm paraphrasing it a bit, and vice versa. So you know a tree by its fruit. This is also another Kingdom of Heaven study. He's like, you beware false prophets, because you're trying to choose the narrow path, you're trying to choose the narrow gate, but as you're walking and you're trying to keep your discipleship straight, there may be people alongside who are like, hey, come this, hey, have you seen this verse? Hey, you don't have to worry about that. Hey, whatever, try this. And they might look like they're wearing sheep's clothing, but do you really know their heart's intention? Can you tell what their fruit is? Are you watching them closely enough? Or are you just taking what they're saying because it's pleasing to the ear? So that's something just to think about in terms of our walk. Judge a tree by its fruit. Judge yourself by a fruit. If you're about to make a decision, you can test what will the fruits of that decision be? What will it produce in you? Sometimes it's hard to tell, God, should I go left? Should I go right? Should I do this? Should I not? What's God's will according to his word? That's number one. And number two, if it's something obvious like, should I help this poor person who needs help and is hungry? Well, of course you should. You don't really need to pray about that. But then sometimes something is much deeper, and you just can't see what to do. And one of the ways is to find out, is there something I want? Like, if I'm just being really honest with myself, would this make me happy? Is that why I can't see clearly here? And why am I afraid of making the other choice? Is it a fear? Is it about me? These are some questions we can ask ourselves when we're faced with tough decisions. Okay. Lastly, on the fruit, what is the fruit of the Spirit? 10 points. No, not 10 points. 1 point.
Meekness, self-control.
Sorry?
Love, joy, peace, patience.
Love, joy, peace, patience.
Kindness, gentleness, meekness, self-control.
Kindness, gentleness, meekness, self-control.
Faithfulness. Did they say it?
I think my thumb went up by mistake. But somewhere there we got 9. Does everyone have that? Does anyone want them on the board? Are we good? Okay, I think we're good. Oh, there's a reason why I brought that up. Yeah, right. Okay. In my version, it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is. It doesn't say the fruits of the Spirit are. What do I mean? You could have joy, but maybe not have peace. Maybe maybe you're joyfully angry. I don't know. Maybe you're unique. I don't know. You know, you could have everything, but you're just not patient. You're like, God, no. You know, and the way I see it is that it's a completeness. It's one fruit. Not to say that when you're joyful, it's not good, but to say that when you have the fullness, when you're walking in fullness, you're exhibiting them all. You know, there's moments in our lives when we have these highs and we're really connected with the Holy Spirit, and we're not lacking in any one of those things. Do you get what I'm saying? Did you have a question?
No, I was going to say, being Messiah-like, it's actually fulfilling all of them, not actually trying to pick one. Because if you're Messiah-like, you'll actually be able to fulfill all of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without even knowing.
Absolutely. Just to repeat that if you didn't hear, to be like Messiah, to be a Christian, to be like Christ, is to fulfill them all. Okay, let's continue. Just a second. I think we're on verse 10. Verse 9. Jonathan said, "Heaven forbid, if I ever were to learn that my father had definitely decided to do you harm, wouldn't I tell you?" So as much as Jonathan is a bit not seeing the full picture, but he still has a good heart in this. And he's not broken the covenant. He's not treated David unfaithfully. Then David asked Jonathan, "But who will tell me in the event your father gives you a harsh answer?" Can I just mention something quick? Why do you guys think David, why did he run to Jonathan? So I mean, he escaped the capital at the time. It wasn't Jerusalem, but he escaped the palace, and then he escaped his home, and he ran to the prophet Samuel, right? Which, that's quite a safe place to be. And then he runs from there to Jonathan. Why?
Because he trusts him.
Okay, trust. Where would you guys run? Family? Anyone else? Is anyone brave enough to be on some, you know what, everyone's prophesying, I'll be safe, Saul's not going to do anything. I thought of that. I was like, yeah, why not? But then I was just wondering, why go to Jonathan? I like the trust. Maybe he might have gone to family, but his family wasn't, last time he was with them, they weren't really his brothers, they weren't really with him. But that's interesting because soon we're going to see his family come to him. But I think it has a lot to do with the fact that there was a covenant between them. Not just a covenant, but a covenant between them and Adonai. You know, it wasn't just here we go. Yes?
It comes from the question. Like when he has the conversation, when he starts the conversation with him, he goes, have I done anything wrong? So what is David really chasing after? Is he chasing after Jonathan? He's chasing after answers. Can you imagine sitting there with Samuel, thinking that Saul will respect Samuel, and then you open up your eyes, you've got messengers at your door, and you've got Samuel at your feet. Oh, sorry, Saul at your feet. And Saul's sitting there, and you're thinking, where do I go? At that point, I think he starts to get these like, why are you chasing me? What is this about? What did I do? And the only person that knows everything about the kingdom besides Saul, someone that he can trust, is Jonathan. So as he goes to Jonathan, he's seeking understanding. And what does he get? Confusion. Jonathan's in disbelief. He's like, no man, he promised me as Adonai lives. There's no way he'd do that. He's like, hello? I was with Shmuel. I saw him, he's standing over there. So you have this dynamic that's going on here, that David just wants to understand why he's going through what he's going through. Jonathan doesn't have the answers. Samuel doesn't have the answers or protection. Well, what are we really chasing after? Okay? So you're going to see it's a very important point that Billy brought up here. We can get stuck so much in the remezes and the midrash and the sort level, but understanding what these guys are going through is where I want you to put your feet in right now. Can you imagine being Jonathan? Can you imagine being David? Can you imagine the frustration and the anguish and annoyance of Saul? Can you imagine the sadness of Samuel? And David is just trying to figure out where he is and what's going on. Jonathan's by his side trying to figure it out as well. Okay?
Absolutely. And I mean, we know the fuller story. We can look at this from a bird's eye view, and we know David's path and where he ends up. And lots of times we just like God to just hand us the kingdom. You know what? I'm anointing you, and then move in, and you're king now. But he gets there through lots of trials, lots of death threats, lots of heartache, lots of wondering, am I going to make it or not? And a lot of our walk is like that as Christians, as believers. You know, so persevere. Don't think that just because it's so tough that it's not going to work out. You know, have three groups of messengers come to try and kill you. Anytime recently?
No.
You know, then I think you're okay. Okay, so excuse me. So verse 11. Jonathan said to David, "Come, let's go out into the countryside." They went out, both of them, to the countryside. Jonathan said to David, "Adonai, the God of Israel, is witness. After I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow or the third day, then if things look good for David, I will send and let you know." Have you guys noticed that he's talking in the third person? I mean, David's right there. If things look good for you, I'll let you know. Why does he say if things look good for David?
Is he not addressing Adonai?
Hey?
Is he not addressing Adonai?
When he says David?
No, yeah, when he's speaking about David.
Well, he says, I'll send and let you know. Well, I mean, I think there's an aspect of them acknowledging that Adonai is here because they're like, he is witness. You know, when 2 or 3 are gathered, we get thoughts of that. And they take this covenant between them so seriously that it's not just a promise between me and you. God is going to hold me accountable to this. So yeah, I thought that was also interesting. Just a second. Okay, so this is so how many times has the covenant been mentioned now? Well, yeah, actually, let's just read through this couple of verses because it's about to be the second time. If things look good for David, I will send and let you know. I also think it's a bit of respect. You know, I don't know if you guys have noticed in some languages, you don't, I think in Afrikaans it happens a lot. Like, you won't refer to your parents by their name, but you'll say, "Mother says this," or, you know, type of thing. I don't know if I'm butchering it, but I think it's that kind of thing as well. That as much as Jonathan is older, in terms of soldiery, they're kind of peers. But right now, he's honoring him the way you would speak to a king. But if my lord, you know, sometimes you'd be like, but if my lord, you kind of separate yourself from them in that sense. And we'll see that also Jonathan, he's understanding what God is doing. Just as we read about how he's going to reaffirm this covenant. Let's.
So another thing as well.
Yeah.
David means my beloved, and we know that Jonathan and David's souls were tied together.
Yeah.
So it could also be a play on that as well.
Nice. So, verse 13. But if my father intends to do you harm, may Adonai do as much and more to me if I don't let you know and send you away, so that you can go in peace. As I'm reading that, just consider who else has spoken this way before. May Adonai do as much to me and more if I don't... Just make a note in your notebook. And may Adonai be with you, just as he used to be with my father. So there's the first hint that Jonathan understands what's going on. May Adonai be with you, just as he was with my father. So in other words, is he with my father? Is Adonai with my father? No, he's not. He's no longer with my father. But may he be with you. And how was he with my father? My father was a king who went out and fought Adonai's battles. The first battle, Adonai's spirit rushed upon Saul. He cut up oxen and sent them out to all Israel, and they rallied behind him. And he's now saying, may Adonai be with you as he was with my father. So he understands what's going on. However, you are to show me Adonai's kindness, not only while I'm alive, so that I do not die. Verse 15, but also after Adonai has eliminated every one of David's enemies. There's another third person reference. From the face of the earth, you are to continue showing kindness to my family forever. Kindness to my family forever. If you want to link that, we can see a place where David basically is honoring this covenant in 2 Samuel. I think you can find that in chapter 9, verse 1 to 13. But also after Adonai has eliminated every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth, you are to continue showing kindness to my family forever. So the first covenant, that was between David and Jonathan. But now he's reaffirming it. And who is this covenant between? Okay, let's read that verse again.
With the house of David, with his dynasty.
With the house of David. And it affects who else? Can I have a copy?
It affects his whole lineage.
It affects his whole lineage.
Yes.
Okay. So last week we spoke about David being from the house of Judah and Jonathan, house of Benjamin, and all of that. So if you've got those notes in your notebook, if you brought the same notebook, just follow on from there. So first there was a covenant with David and Jonathan. So now he reaffirms it, and now it's with the families. Well, covenants normally do affect families. They are intergenerational, but now he's reaffirming it, and he makes David swear because of his love for him. So I just want you guys to see that. So now it's Jonathan's family, and now it's David's family. Okay. So in Jonathan's family, basically David needs to treat them kindly, right? He has to be faithful to this covenant. The same way he's faithful to Jonathan, he must treat Jonathan's family, right? Does that include Saul? Saul, Jonathan's family? Yeah. So is Saul going to be treated kindly in this covenant?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So he's not going to kill Saul?
David didn't.
Yeah, David's not going to kill Saul. So even Saul is okay. Well, he's not going to be killed by David. But then, do we know whether or not Adonai is going to pay the same kindness to Saul? Okay, so he's not. And in not, what is the reason that even though there's this covenant between them, and remember that Adonai is in between them. What is the reason that Saul is going to basically lose out?
Isn't it because suppose if you come up against God's anointed, even though we know that Saul was anointed, but God anoints David, but somehow Saul lost that blessing, that anointing, because of the distressing spirit of the Lord upon him. He lost the kingdom, as Samuel said. So now you're coming up against God's anointed, and God will protect those whom He loves.
So we can say that even though we might be in covenant with Adonai, and Adonai is involved in the covenant, if we don't behave the right way, we can't. It's like people who want to claim blessings. I'm blessed in the city, I'm blessed in the field, I'm blessed walking in, I'm blessed going out. Have you guys heard that before? And you can't claim the blessings of the covenant if you're not in covenant, if you're not behaving as though you're in covenant. It's a very important thing to just realize. This is not a saved by works thing. This is just a thing that because I believe in Jesus, I'm in covenant with Him. I'm walking in covenant with Him. And because of that faith, my actions are going to be testimony to that faith. So how I behave proves whether or not I am in covenant, whether I believe what I say I believe. Yeah?
Can we link that back to the not everyone who calls me Lord will get into heaven?
Absolutely. So there's that kingdom of heaven study again. Nice. Yeah, we can. Because so Jesus is saying in that scripture, many people will come saying, Lord, we prophesied in your name. Have you guys been prophesying lately? No? So prophecies sounds like a big deal. Okay, we cast out demons in your name. Anybody cast out a demon? We performed many miracles in your name. Anybody want some grape juice? Some wine? Okay. We healed the sick in your name. We raised the dead in your name. Okay, healing the sick. Baruch Hashem. I had a fever last week and I'm here now. But then I haven't raised the dead. I've heard of it. But point is, if you went to a church and you saw that happening, or you saw a guy doing that kind of stuff, you'd think, wow, they're good. Let me follow this guy. And that's taken us back to this wolves in sheep's clothing. Many people are saying this way, that way. There's many teachings on YouTube. There's so much stuff out there. But how do you test it? How do you know for sure that it's true? How do you know for sure that it's God's word? That you are the David in the story, that you're the Samuel and not the Saul. You get what I'm saying? Not everyone who says Lord, Lord. Okay. All right, verse 16. Thus Jonathan made a covenant with the family of David, adding, may Adonai seek its fulfillment even through David's enemies. So here's what we were just talking about with Saul. So Saul right now has made himself an enemy of David. But not just an enemy of David. He's made himself an enemy of the king, God. He's made himself an enemy of God. And Jonathan is basically allying himself with David to say, may God seek the fulfillment of our covenant through your enemies being destroyed. So he understands again what's happening in the sense that David is being raised up. Even to the point where he's losing his seat, he's losing his throne, his inheritance, so to speak, but he would rather be on the side of God than chase that.
But it's like almost as if he's even saying, even if my father is your enemy, he'll be my enemy. I mean, It's not really written there, but
Yeah, absolutely. Yes?
Yeah, I think the point of this narrative is that Jonathan is recognizing that there is a massive shift in dynasty here. Shift in kingship, right? So Jonathan, recognizing that Jonathan should be the next king. And he himself is understanding that Adonai has appointed David. And because Adonai has appointed David, he's actually pleading on behalf of him, because what would the new king normally do? Would he allow the old king's children and family to walk around free and happy? Normally not. But David here is again understanding the heart of Jonathan, and he's going to say, all right, well, we're going to look after your family. I haven't taken this kingship by force, and we're going to see that time and time again, like Billy's pointing out. But they was anointed, appointed for that specific purpose. And because there's going to be that shift, even Saul's own household recognizes that David is now the next king. So there's a big shift there.
Okay. So verse 17. Jonathan had David swear it again because of the love he had for him. He loved him as he loved himself. So that's just Jonathan really reaffirming this. And I would say that David's got the upper hand with the way this is going. But Jonathan being the one willing to swear it again because of this love is quite a big statement. So Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh, new moon, and you will be missed because your seat will be empty. The third day, hide yourself in the same place as you did before. Stay by the departure stone. Okay. I will shoot 3 arrows to one side as if I was shooting at a target. Then I will send my boy to recover them. So this was the second time they spoke about the covenant, and we see 3 arrows. This number 3 keeps popping up. Okay. If I tell the boy, they're on this side of you, take them, then come, it means that everything is peaceful for you. As Adonai lives, there's nothing wrong. But if I tell the boy, the arrows are out there beyond you, then get going because Adonai is sending you away. As for the matter we discussed earlier, Adonai is between me and you forever. Okay, so we're seeing it again, that Adonai he's the center of this covenant. Something interesting, I'll just mention it briefly. That departure stone, what do you guys have there?
Stone by Ezekiel.
Stone by Ezel.
Yes.
Okay, anybody got anything else? Okay, so stone, we know what stone is, right? What's stone in Hebrew? Eben.
Sorry.
Eben.
Yes.
So in Hebrew it's Ha'eben Ezel, the stone of departure. Okay. Okay, quickly. Right. So is over here fine? So we got Ha'eben.
Billy, sorry, I'm going to ask you right underneath that side rather.
Over
A
here.
bit glare from the light.
Over here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ha'eben. Okay. If you were to do the gematria on this, Ha'eben equals 58. Does anybody want to see that gematria? Because we don't have to go into it. We good? Just we can go study it. It equals 58. Another word that equals 58 is chen. Anybody know what chen means? Chen is like grace or mercy. So in the beginning, not in the beginning, but in the time of Noah's flood, Noah also equals 58. Chen is like Noah backwards. But then basically God had, Noah received grace or what does it say? Favor or grace in the sight of Adonai. And that's what this idea is. So he's running for his life. He's in trouble with with the kingdom, basically, the earthly kingdom. And he's by the stone of departure. He needs to go, he needs to leave. But even at this big stone, there is grace. God is still with him. He is not abandoned. So I just thought that's an interesting link. This also ties to Noah. And we know that in the time of Noah, as we're studying on Saturdays, we did that man mortal sorrow, the Genesis 5. He shall come down teaching that his death shall bring the despairing comfort and rest. So that comfort and rest is also linked to this. So even though right now he's not resting, he's running for his life, but God is with him, there is grace, there is rest coming if he departs. Okay. As for the matter we discussed, Adonai is between you and me forever. So David hid himself in the countryside. Okay, sorry, before we go on. So covenants, like a marriage covenant or like, covenants that God makes with man and then covenants that men make with each other, they are binding, and they are forever. What's an example of covenants? Covenants where God would be at the center.
Noah and the Noah covenant that God made.
Okay, the covenant of that God made with man through Noah. Any others? Okay, with Abraham. So what was happening there? Covenant with Abraham?
He said that basically to give him a son and he'd multiply him.
Yeah, so basically God was calling out a family to be separated and he was going to bless the world through this family. And he had his own agenda, he had his covenant to make, and they had to take on his sign and obey his stipulations. Are we okay? And then there was other covenants that build on top of that covenant, but I just wanted us to understand that covenants are binding. Something that's very close to a covenant but is not a covenant is like an oath or a vow, which is also very, very binding. And if you were to read in it's in Ecclesiastes, I think it might be in chapter 5, and it speaks about do not be hasty when you come to God to make a vow. Choose your keywords very carefully. A lot of the time people, they just, I promise, I'll do it, whatever the case might be. And sometimes that's for God. And we must just be very careful. What does Jesus say about oaths?
Not swear by anything.
He says, do not swear by anything, not even by the hair on your head. It says, not by the earth because it is God's footstool, not by heaven because it is his throne, and not even by the hair of your head. Because you can't make one of them white or black. You have no control. So let your yes be a yes. Let your no be a no. Have integrity. And if you feel the need to, I promise you 10 times till Sunday, here's my car keys, whatnot, you're going a bit too far. Let your yes be a yes. Let your no be a no. If you can't do it, you can't do it. And think very, very carefully before you make a vow. Because, vows are also binding. Okay, let's move on. So David hid himself in the countryside, 1 verse 24. When the new moon came, the king sat down to eat his meal. The king sat at his usual place by the wall. Jonathan stood up, and Abner sat next to Saul, but David's place was empty. However, Saul didn't say anything that day because he thought, something has happened to him. He is unclean. Yes, that's it. He isn't clean. Why would David not be there if he's not clean? Any ideas? No ideas? No ideas?
Well, if it's a new moon festival, which we know that if you look at Numbers 28 and new moon festival, if it's honoring the new moon, they had to, come to the temple to offer sacrifice and stuff. So you couldn't come to the temple or a place where you're going to offer the sacrifices in an unclean manner. You had to be clean. So that was my thought. That was my idea. And he's coming to the king. I don't know. So in the same sense, he's coming. You can't come to the king we can't come to God in an uncleanly manner.
Absolutely. Okay, let's continue. Sorry, I lost my place. Where are we?
27.
27, thanks. The day after the new moon, the second day, David's place was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan his son, "Why hasn't Jesse's son come to the meal either yesterday or today?" Okay, two things here. Why are they celebrating new moon over 2 days? Does Torah say that they should celebrate over 2 days?
So this is a question for after.
Oh, okay. Maybe we can come back to it after. But that should be in the back of your mind. We can answer it after. Okay. And then, so now, look, Saul is calling him Jesse's son. You know, why hasn't Yeshai's son come? You can see the definite change in attitude towards him. Okay. Jonathan answered Saul, "David begged me to let him go to Bethlehem. He said, 'Please let me go because our family has a sacrifice in the city and my brother demanded that I come. So now if you look on me favorably, please let me get away and see my brothers.' That's why he hasn't come to the king's table." Is Jonathan being 100% truthful? Is that okay? Is it okay to lie if you're saving someone's life? Am I asking a difficult question? Another example comes up. Pharaoh tells the handmaids, the midwives, tells the midwives that they must kill every boy that is born, and they don't. And then when you ask them why, they're like, "No, these Hebrew women, they're not like the Egyptian women. By the time we get there, they've already given birth," which wasn't the case. They lied. But then it says that God prospered their families. If God was angry with them, why would he prosper their families, make them founders of families? Sometimes these things, they look a little bit skew, and I'm not saying it's okay to lie. I'm saying that right now we have to look at where is Jonathan's allegiance, who's the true king, and who. You know, he's made a covenant between himself and David. So I would go as far as to say it's like when God is telling Samuel, "Go and anoint David." Samuel says, "But if I go, what's going to happen? Saul's going to kill me," right? And then God says, "No, just take a lamb. I mean, take your oil with you, and just say that you're going to make a sacrifice." Which he was technically going to make a sacrifice, but that's not the whole truth. You know what I mean? And it's like a weird dynamic, if I can say that. But it's just something to think about. Any thoughts? Sorry? My answer. My answer. I would say that, let's take it back to the situation. No, let's not take it back to the situation.
Keep it context. Save yourself a lot of heartache.
No? Okay. In this situation...
Let me phrase it this way. Is it okay to lie to save someone's life? Yes or no?
If that is the only way, I would say yes. And I would say that, if there is a better way to do it, and I know that there's a better way to do it, then God can see my heart that, you know, I'm not doing the best thing that I can.
What do you guys think? Right, if I don't lie, I'm actually allowing my brother to carry on and go commit the murder, right? So I have to prevent him. And if I need to lie to him to prevent the murder from take place, am I loving my brother by allowing him to sin, or am I loving my brother to stop him from sin?
I get you.
If you were to break this down Hebraically, you would say, what is the greatest commandment? The heavy one of murder and the light one of sharing a false truth? Which one carries most weight? Obviously murder is the biggest issue here. The lying thing we can sort out later. If it is, it's the same as when we come down to, and I might be opening up a can of worms here, but you did it. So if someone breaks into your house, am I allowed to defend myself? If he's going to kill somebody, can I kill him first? What does Torah say?
Torah says that if you defend yourself and it's nighttime and he dies,
then it is.
It's fine.
When it's about sanctifying life, it's okay. All right, so we mustn't get ourselves all up in this process of, I need to honor the truth. If you say, now let's take it back to Germany or Poland, and you're hiding people because they want to be carted off to Auschwitz, people lied all the time to the authorities to keep these people safe. They saved lives because of it. What do you think God would do? Say, oh, you know, you were so close to the kingdom, but because you fibbed, you're out. Obviously, it's to protect life, and that's the most important thing. So in this case, it actually shows the deception, or shows the true heart condition, and Jonathan gets to see Saul unveiled. There's no more, I can't believe this is my dad, he wouldn't really do this, would he? He gets to see Daddy's true intentions. And that deception, which Saul has been lying to Jonathan about, he gets deceived in the same way, and now all of a sudden the veil comes off. Right?
100%. Okay. Alright, so he said, please let me go because our family has a sacrifice in the city. My brother demanded that I come. So now if you look on me favorably, please let me get away and see my brothers. Excuse me. That's why he hasn't come to the king's table. At that, Shaul flew into a rage at Jehonathan and said, you crooked rebel. Don't I know that you've made the son of Yeshai your best friend? You don't care that you're shaming yourself and dishonoring your mother, do you? That is low. He's talking about his wife. Because as long as the son of Yeshai lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be secure. Now send and bring him here to me. He deserves to die. Earlier on, he made an oath. After Jonathan had convinced him that David's a good guy, what did he say?
As the Lord lives.
As Adonai lives, David will not die. Now he's cursing his son, he's cursing his wife, and he's like, bring him here, let him die. So he's blinded by rage. Thank you. Jonathan said to Shaul, his father, why should he be put to death? What has he done? This is the same intercession as last time. But this time, Shaul threw his spear at him. So now the spear at his own son, aiming to kill. So he's concerned that his son won't have a kingdom, but now it's like his son is dead to him. It's like, well, I mean, if you don't want the kingdom... Anyways, Jonathan could no longer doubt that his father was determined to put David to death. I love Jonathan's heart because when we read the story later, we'll see he still stood by his father, even though he just tried to kill him, which is amazing. I don't know if that's a blind loyalty or if it's just a really good heart, but it's just something to consider. But he ended up dying because of that. But anyways, Jonathan got up from the table in a fury, and he ate no food the second day of the month, both because he was upset over David and because his father had put him to shame. The next morning, Jonathan went out into the country at the time he had arranged with David, taking with him a young boy. He told the boy, now run and find the arrows I'm about to shoot. As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy reached the place where the arrow was that Jonathan had shot, Jonathan shouted at the boy, isn't the arrow behind you? Isn't the arrow beyond you? Jonathan continued shouting after the boy, quick, hurry, don't just stand there. Jonathan's boy gathered the arrows and returned to his master. But the boy didn't understand anything about the matter, only Jonathan and David understood. Jonathan gave his weapons to his boy and said to him, go, carry them to the city. As soon as the boy had gone, David got up from a place south of the stone, fell face down on the ground, prostrated himself 3 times, and they kissed one another and wept with each other until it had become too much for David. Jonathan said to David, go in peace, because we have sworn, both of us, in the name of Adonai, that Adonai will be between me and you, and between my descendants and yours forever. So now, how many times has the covenant been mentioned? Third time. Okay, so all these threes, let me come back to the threes. But then, so just two things I want to highlight here. David prostrated himself 3 times. That reminds me of Jacob. When Jacob was about to meet Esau, he prostrated himself, but not 3 times, it was 7 times. But I find that interesting. So we've got David being lifted up. He's going to be the new king. But he's coming in such humility that he's bowing to Jonathan 3 times. I mean, I don't think I've bowed to anyone once, especially this is like a face down on the ground type of thing. It's like, look, you are my Lord type of thing. The humility, knowing that God has chosen you, knowing that he is with you and you're anointed, but he's this humble. To a person that he's also made a peer-to-peer covenant with. I thought that was interesting. And then this other part, they kissed one another. So some people might look at this and say that kindred spirit or that souls being tied that we read about earlier must have been something more. But I just want to point back to some places in Torah. So if you just do some study, you'll find that when Jacob when he fled from Esau, and he found Rachel at the well with 3 flocks of sheep. There's another 3. Chase it down. He found 3 flocks of sheep, and then he kissed Rachel and wept. Okay, which maybe we don't know what kind of kiss that was. But then Laban later on, so Rachel goes and tells Laban, hey, my relative is here, blah, blah, blah. Laban comes running, and Laban kisses Jacob. So, does that mean Laban and Jacob had a thing going?
So, Billy, can talk to you as well.
Yeah.
So if you take a look at culture once again, right?
Yeah.
Even if you go to Italy or those areas, France, they kiss both sides of the face. So it also comes down to culture. It's not a kiss like we think today, as in a husband and wife will give each other. It's more of a cultural thing as well, to show respect and adoration.
Absolutely.
I think people take it too far because of trying to create a doctrine out of something that's not there to justify other ungodly things.
Paul also, check me if I'm wrong, Paul or Yeshua actually says that you greet each other with a brotherly kiss. Yeah.
So we've got some growing to do in this fellowship.
Not with Corona, eh? Just saying.
Not with Corona. Okay. All right. So let's just recap on the chapters. Anything that jumped out to anybody? Anything you want to mention? Maybe something you saw that we didn't highlight. Something that's not quite clear that you just want to find out. But what is this thing? Anything like that, or just a comment?
I have my own, but if there's nobody there first.
Anyone?
Nobody that side.
3 days.
3 days. You wanna which 3 days? The
Rosh
day.
Chodesh.
Excuse me.
Rosh Chodesh 2 days with the 3rd day.
Oh, okay. So why 3 days, or why is Rosh Chodesh 2 days? Okay. So back in the day, there's a couple reasons why Rosh Chodesh was a 2-day observance. First of all, we can see that so David says tomorrow is the new moon. New moon comes, they celebrate, but they still have another celebration the other day.
How did he know tomorrow was the new moon?
So how he would have known that tomorrow is the new moon is because you basically can count the days.
Witness that he would have seen.
Yeah, but how would he know that tomorrow is the new moon? So that would have probably been the 29th day. In other words, it could have been wishful thinking in terms of it being the 28th day and then tomorrow is the new moon. But I think it was most probably the 29th day, and the new moon probably hadn't appeared yet, and he's like, listen, tomorrow's the new moon. And what they would do is, in the olden days, because of the amount of time it would take to get the message to all of Israel. They would celebrate it over 2 days. And also at that time, Jerusalem had not yet been chosen as the place where new moons must be declared from. At that time, David's kingdom hadn't been set up. The temple hadn't, or the tabernacle hadn't moved into Jerusalem yet. So they had this 2-day celebration scenario. Is that clear? Should I explain a bit more? There's another reason, which is a bit more scientific. Sometimes, so what happens with the lunar cycle is it appears every 29.5 to 30 days. But now sometimes, so in other words, if today is the 29th day and it hasn't appeared, the likelihood is that it's going to appear tomorrow. But there's sometimes, very rare, that it doesn't appear tomorrow. And it goes for 2 nights with darkness. Like it's just rare occurrences. And then on the 3rd night, it would show, like the first sliver. It happens sometimes. And the thing is, because of those types of things, I think was another reason why they decided, we're going to do this over 2 days, just in case we miss it, or whatever the case might be. And it just became a tradition. So it's not something commanded in Torah. It's a 1-day thing. But according to...
I'm just watching people glitch that way.
But according...
Glitching, I'm processing. That's cool.
Is it clear?
Yeah, what you're saying is correct. I think let's just bring it. You've got 2 different dynamics, right? So what we have is we've got people saying that, how many of you know what conjunction moon is?
I understand everything Billy was saying.
How many of you know what conjunction moon is?
It means that it's in the dark, as
Right.
Billy said.
Okay, so when we say it's new moon, some people say conjunction moon. How do I know it's conjunction?
You
And how long is conjunction?
Because you can't see it.
Can't see it, okay, so then it disappears. So I know when I see the last piece of the moon, the next day is guaranteed, right? How long is conjunction moon normally? How long is it dark for?
Technically it's supposed to be 1 day, but
Normally 2 to 3
it's not
days.
that. 2 to 3 days.
2 to 3
Oh,
days
so
you have
it's
no
yes.
moon sighting. So what does that mean for us? Some people believe that when we talk about Rosh Chodesh, and they point back to this passage, they say it's obvious that it's conjunction, they're celebrating it over 2 days, therefore everything points to a conjunction moon, new moon celebration. Are you with me? Right. What we know is that Billy's description is actually more accurate. Historically, we know that it was first sliver. There was a sighting, the Sanhedrin would see it, then they would send out witnesses. But because we don't know whether it's going to appear on the 29th day or the 30th day, they would celebrate over 2 days. Alright? This became... Let me ask you something. In Leviticus 23, do we have a let's get together and celebrate New Moon? No. But biblically, we see it in more than one place that they did actually celebrate it.
Yeah.
Okay? They got together, they had a celebration. It was the time when a new cycle started. And as we count up, we know that it's going to affect our feast times and so on. So what we see here is David and them probably practicing it's going to be the 29th. If it doesn't appear, it's going to be the 30th. On the 3rd day, we're good, we can carry on as normal. But those 2 feast days, not 3, do not point to a conjunction, point to a 29, 30, looking for the first of the sliver scenario. Okay? So if anybody comes up to you and they say, oh yes, but David and them, and they talk about conjunction, hopefully now you understand where they're coming from. And you understand where they're making the mistake. Yes? Alright,
But I find it interesting that the importance of the new moon is mentioned here, because it's almost as if I was trying to figure out if they were starting to look for it specifically coming up to Passover, or was it as in the Yom Teruah looking up for the moon as well?
It doesn't really mention as a festival, but it does specifically mention as new moon. So, we could say maybe it might have been a Yom Teruah scenario, but for the most part, it could have just been a normal new moon celebration where and we see that in a couple of places. Do yourselves a bit of a study. go and look to see where they celebrated. It's in different portions. And you'll see that they did celebrate it in antiquity. In biblical times, it was a gathering. I know of some Messianic congregations that get together for a new moon dinner. So they will get together, the instruction about blowing the shofar every new moon. So the congregation gets together every 29th day and goes, all right, are we going to see it? If they do, they have dinner and they have a good time. If they don't, they get back. Sometimes they do 2 days, sometimes they come back the next day and then they fulfill that mitzvah. Okay, it's not particularly instructed, but it is a biblical narrative.
Okay. All right then. Chapter 21, are we ready?
Yep.
Or have we run out of time?
7:48.
Yeah, probably.
All right, so we can pick up next week. All right. So no questions? All good? All right then. There's a blessing I just want to read at the end now, before we pray. Praised be you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given your word, the Hebrew scriptures and the new covenant, to all humanity. Praised be you, O Lord, who for his own name's sake, in love, has brought the Redeemer, Yeshua. Amen?
Amen.
Right. Father, thank you for this teaching, for this day. Thank you for everyone who is here. I pray, my God, that your word would cement in their hearts and that they would walk it out, Father. In the name of Yeshua, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I wasn't twitching. I'm super serious. I'm processing the way he says it.
This is why I was funny. Enjoy that anyway. What? No. You going? Right?
This message is proof to people that with